Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we had quite the few first days of NFL free agencies, plenty of heartbreaking departures, some minor additions to the San Francisco 49ers, and plenty of hot takes and overreactions to what has been the first 2 days of NFL free agency. Going to talk about all that coming up next right here on 49ers Access. This is arguably the best time of the year for NFL fans, right? Every team feels like they have a chance. You have usually big names departing certain teams, joining others. You are waiting for your favorite NFL team to make a big splash in free agency, or you're waiting for the NFL draft to come to hopefully see what your team looks like in the next season. And for the San Francisco 49ers, this has been an off-season, a free agency that has many people reacting in a negative way to what has transpired thus far. And I get that. I totally understand that. But I do want to start today's show by, one, asking you to like, share, and subscribe. But two, I want to talk about the mainstream media's kind of overreaction to what we're seeing, the fan overreaction to what we've seen thus far in the first day and a half or so of NFL free agency. And I want to start off by saying I completely understand watching many players that we've come to emotionally love and tie ourselves to leave stinks. We love Dre Greenlaw. We love Kyle Juszczyk, Talanoa Hufanga, Charvarius Ward, and plenty more along the way. Seeing all those players leave is never fun for any organization, right? You have emotionally tied yourself to them, and knowing that in 2025, they're not going to be a part of this next chapter in the San Francisco 49ers history, it's a hard thing to look past and say, man, I'm okay with this. I totally understand that point of view. It also makes it more relevant to think back and say, wow, we really couldn't get the job done for Kyle Juszczyk, Dre Greenlaw in previous years, Frank Gore, Joe Staley, and many others along the way, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Deebo Samuel now. It makes all of that more relevant, and it can make you more frustrated now that we're seeing this mass exodus of great players on the 49ers. However, I think the media and fan overreaction is completely absurd. We knew this somewhat of a spring cleaning was coming. We knew this mass exodus was coming. It was inevitable based on what John Lynch told us at the Combine, what Mike Silver reported earlier in the last week or so for The Athletic. Ruthless, calculated, cold. Those were the words attached to the San Francisco 49ers going into their offseason. This was not going to be easy. It was going to be some heartbreak. It was going to be, again, ruthless, calculated, cold when it came to who they cut, who they acquired, who they traded away. This was a long time coming for a team that, frankly, was absolutely terrible last year, right? And the media thus far is making these insane declarations. The window was closed. The Super Bowl window was closed for the San Francisco 49ers. And again, when you see what's happening from outside the building, it is very easy to justify that standpoint. However, it is 3 p.m. on day 2 of NFL free agency. Day 2. We are 2 days into the new league year. And it's over. It's a wash. 2025, this team is going to stink. They're going to be terrible. They're going to trade Brandon Ayuk. Brock Purdy going to get a new contract. They're gutting the team for him. Why even watch? Why even go to the games? I don't support Jed York or John Lynch. Fire Kyle Shanahan. We are seeing these overreactions everywhere. And it's comical. It's comical. What did some fans and the media think recalibration meant? What did they think that a reboot of some sorts meant, a recasting meant? Every beat reporter was telling you this was coming. Everybody in the know, whether it's national, Mike Silver, Diana Rossini, Adam Schefter, Rappaport, Pelissero, those on the beat there every single day in San Francisco and Santa Clara, were telling you this was going to be a hard off season to get through. And look, the Niners are not going to be big name players in free agency. That's not what the plan has been. It's not what we were told, and it's not what's going to happen. There is no way they were going to reinvest more money, more finances, trade away high-end draft picks on this exact same roster. That was 6-11 last year. And I really think this is necessary to bounce back. They were old. They were slow. They could not run this team back and invest more finances into this. It's impossible for the longevity of your franchise to sustain success while pouring money into an old, slow, last-place roster. You can't do that. They had no depth. They were thin right when you get past their star players. This is necessary. This exodus, this mass releasing and cutting and signing smaller deals is necessary for the hopeful, big word there, hopeful, bouncing back in 2025 and 2026. Now, with that, you have to hit on your draft picks. We knew this was coming into free agency. We knew this going into April's draft. Everything hinges on the NFL draft. The Niners' success this year was never going to hinge on free agency, never going to hinge on who they signed, who they traded for. It was always going to hinge on the 11 or so players they bring in April's draft. We knew this from the year, from the day the year ended. When they lost to the Cardinals, it was okay, our eyes are towards the NFL draft. If they kept Kyle Juszczyk, they were still going to need to draft a top edge rusher. If they kept Leonard Floyd, they were still going to have to find a star defensive tackle. Even if they brought back Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins, they were still going to need offensive line help, a receiver, a safety. Nobody who they've cut thus far is going to make or break their season. All of it. Even if they brought back every single player they've cut and lost, it was always going to hinge on April's 2025 NFL draft. You can argue, though, the only player that they have not brought back that impacts their draft strategy is probably Dre Greenlaw. That's the biggest gut punch of them all, in my opinion, knowing that Dre, of everybody they've let go of and not brought back, probably had the highest ceiling and was the most impactful player when healthy on the roster the last couple years. I know it sounds bleak. I know it feels bleak. When I saw Kyle Juszczyk get released, I said, oh my God, my heart is hurting for them. You saw George Kittle post on social media the heartbreak emoji in a juice box. That sucks. You saw Lenore post about every single defensive player leaving, how the emotions he had to him, how he's tied to them, the help he got from them growing into a star player in the NFL. That sucks to watch. This feels very much like the Harbaugh era when you watched Gore and Davis and Willis and Bowman and Smith, the other Smith. You had at that time a mass exodus as well. Now, different approaches. This is a forced one, and I think it's really important that we take this thing in stride. Don't overreact. Wait and see, because no matter what they did in free agency, it was not going to highly impact their future. It was always going to hinge on the NFL draft. That's a lot of pressure put on those 11 draft picks, but that's what they're planning for. They wanted to get younger. They wanted to get cheaper. To do so, you have to cut players and draft well. We have to wait to see how this thing plays out before we say, oh, it's over. They're going to stink. You have to wait and see. And that's hard to do as fans. It's hard to do as someone that covers the team. I write for them or write and cover them. I'm on the radio covering San Francisco 49ers content and the year. It sucks to watch this. It's heartbreaking at times. However, the overreactions I've seen so far are insane. Oh my goodness, Leonard Floyd's gone. Honestly, who cares? He had 8.5 sacks. Awesome. Cool. Was he an impact player last year? No, he wasn't whatsoever. This Niners team did the right thing, the necessary thing when it comes to rebooting, if you will, if they can refine success. Whether it's Jed York, Parag Marate, again, ruthless, calculated, cold. That's what this looked like, and it stinks. I get that, but it's necessary to hopefully and eventually find further success down the road. With that, I want to go to the YouTube comments because we already have 21 of them. And Tommy Huxley kicks things off and says, "We suck again?" Or if I'll give you the Waterboy impression, "Oh no, we suck again." No, we don't. We're going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. But Paul Nappy says, "Horrible offseason," which is met with Kawachipto saying, "It's a good offseason thus far." Papa J says, "Like and subscribe." I completely agree. And Fluffy Ninja says, "This free agency has me on nitroglycerin." It's been crazy thus far. It's crazy. Yes, the new year starts tomorrow. Free agency starts today. It's all my fault, according to Papa J. I will take that and run with it because I think this is necessary. Now, obviously, you want to bring back Dre Greenlaw. You want to bring back some of your guys, and they certainly tried to do so. But I think you have to do this. You talk about, this year being hard. I think this was building from last year. I think a lot of these people, really would have been gone last year. They tried to kind of, I guess you can say, thread the needle somewhat, bring in Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, bring in some people. It didn't work out. You have to admit your mistakes. San Francisco's doing that by taking a massive dead cap this year and hoping it pays off in the future. Fluffy Ninja says here, losing Dre Greenlaw was mother effing painful. It sucks. It hurts. I did not expect it. I told you it wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to bring him back, although my predictions later on in free agency twisted that way. But the entire offseason, I was saying I don't think he comes back, which good for him. Got paid a lot of money in Denver, but I think it was a right decision to let him leave in free agency. Papa J says, in all reality, how much of the 4 ratings only 49ers content creators had a big influence on this fan base's panic attack? To be honest with you, I usually don't watch other content creators. I want to have my own opinion on things. That said, there is some people in this content creating space that are doing a great job. Others do tend to want the overreactions and feed into that. That said, everyone can have their own opinion on things. I disagree with that. I think it's a good thing for this team. And I would push back on the idea that San Francisco is having a bad offseason. Just because you lose players doesn't mean you necessarily lose wins. I think San Francisco could, while not easily, I think there is a way they can get back to being an above 500 team next year and be somewhat competitive as soon as 2025. I think it's Beto says here on Facebook right now, who is our starting defensive lineman? You got Nick Bosa, you got Yetur Gross-Matos, you got probably Kevin Givens, and then maybe Jordan Elliott. It's not great. It's an area they certainly have to improve on, which I think they will. They still can in free agency. But again, that draft is going to be so important. You are seeing so many people getting overpaid. Like Jonathan Allen, Javon Kinlaw got $45 million. Aaron Banks got $77 million. A lot of people are overpaying certain players. A lot of teams are buying into players that really don't deserve the money they're getting, but thumbs up to them. And San Francisco's playing the waiting game. I think playing a smart game here. And honestly, I think they're setting themselves up for a pretty good draft if they can hit on those picks they have in April. Tommy Huxley with the super chat saying, with Brendel, you say Brenda, I'll call him Brendel, as our center, we are going nowhere. Well, he may have to fight Kyle Shanahan and Chris Forrester on that. And I'll tell you this, We'll get into Jake Brendel in a second because I do want to bring him up because I know some fans are kind of irate in regards to him being on the team still. I think there is a future in which Jake Brendel does start for this team and they can be somewhat successful. But again, Matt Hennessy is a wild card here. I think Matt Hennessy could be this team's starter as soon as this season as center. What else do we have here on the YouTube chat? Keys says, hopefully Niners kill it like Philadelphia. Nobody thought Bond and Beckham were going to be good. They were great, and they killed it in the draft, and they won a Super Bowl. I think while Philadelphia's may not be the blueprint to follow, I think the Rams one is a big one, and we'll get to that in a hot second here. So a great comment by Keys. A lot of great comments thus far. And yes, Kawachipto, the Packers just love to have the perpetual guard issue. I don't understand signing Aaron Banks to a massive deal, but thank you for the compensation pick. And let's move on to the departures thus far in San Francisco, which have been arguably the bigger storyline of free agency rather than the 3 or 4 signings they have made throughout day number 2. And throughout the show, and we'll be on Twitter, we'll be talking about maybe some moves that could be made and keeping our eye on Joey Bosa as things progress. But let's get to the departures because a lot of them, Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Aaron Banks, if you want to count Deebo Samuel, Jalen Moore, Elijah Mitchell, Travarius Ward, Javon Hargrave, Joshua Dobbs, Kyle Juszczyk, Malik Collins, and Leonard Floyd. Double-digit departures for San Francisco thus far. It's a lot of money off the books, a lot of talent leaving for other teams. So let's start towards the top with the 2 new Denver Broncos, that being Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga.
Without PwC, the bottom line is that what you're doing today probably isn't going to get you where you need to go tomorrow. It's time to see ahead and get ahead. PwC can help you find ways to grow and new ways to make money. So reinvent your business model and meet the future with PwC. Learn more at pwc.com.
And the Dre Greenlaw one, I think, hurt me the most. Who doesn't love Dre Greenlaw? I was anticipating this move to happen, albeit not to the Broncos, but 3 years, $35 million is the contract he gets. Good for Dre Greenlaw. Happy for him. I'm happy he gets to play for a competent head coach out there in Denver. He'll get to play Patrick Mahomes twice a year, get to go up against some of the best teams in football, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, again, KC, Reed, Travis Kelce. There's a reason they wanted to pay up for him. Happy for him, but it stinks. There are so many great memories for Dre Greenlaw. We can all speculate and say, had he been healthy, they probably would have won the Super Bowl about 2 years ago now. I think they would have. His injury was and is one of the most impactful, I think, probably in Super Bowl history. But even going back to his rookie season, he was just as important to help establishing San Francisco's defense as I think Fred Warner was. Obviously, Warner's the top dog, the Mike linebacker, the captain, all-pro Fred for a reason. But that 2019 draft class was instrumental in getting San Francisco back into being a perennial contender in the NFC. You had Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, DJ Jones, Dre Greenlaw. DJ Jones may have been 2018, but still, Dre, Deebo, and Bosa were so important to this team. The impact they had is unlike anyone else we've seen thus far in San Francisco. You're hoping that 2024 and 2025 can be as important as that 2019 draft class was. That stop against the Seahawks in Week 17 in Seattle, which had been a house of horrors for San Francisco. It felt like the entire Harbaugh era and previously with Pete Carroll there. That win kind of turned the tide and I think completely allowed San Francisco to buy in to this new regime, Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh. That was kind of not the first big win, but a very big win. Don't forget earlier in that season, San Francisco lost a heartbreaker against Seattle at home, and getting a Week 17 division clinching game against Seattle with the all-white throwbacks on at the goal line against Travis Homer was a massive play and kind of jolted San Francisco into an incredible playoff run as well. So Greenlaw is going to be missed. He is a partner in crime with Fred Warner, and I think it is heartbreaking. Like, that one sucked. I just got Dre Greenlaw's jersey last year as a fan. And it stinks, but I think a necessary evil, if you will, of letting him leave to hopefully get San Francisco back on track and save some money in the near future. Talanoa Hufanga joins him. I don't feel as upset about this one. If you know myself, I was pretty much of the understanding that Hufanga was going to leave, and I was okay with that. They were building up towards this. The minute they drafted Malik Mustafa, there was a shift going on. And I think for Hufanga to get roughly $15 million a year with the Broncos, 3 years, $45 million, good for him. He fits with the Broncos more than San Francisco. They bring back Robert Saleh. They're probably going to find a safety on top of the one they already drafted, or they're going to see Jair Brown be the free safety, if you will, next to Mustafa in 2025. So good for Hufanga. The Tongan Tiger is no more in San Francisco, which stinks. There was an aura around Hufanga, kind of like Dre Greenlaw. They brought the energy, good run defending players. But I think there is an organizational shift, as Mike Silver put it, where Hufanga really wasn't a need, or if you will, on this defense. The other one I think is one of the more shocking moves of free agency, at least for myself. Aaron Banks, 4 years, $77 million for the Packers. Of all the moves for the Green Bay Packers to make, not a top-end receiver, not an edge rusher, Aaron Banks, where the Packers have a notoriously really good guard factory. They can improve guards. Guard really isn't even a position where you have to pay up for. So didn't make sense from that perspective, but good for Aaron Banks. Was pretty bad last year for San Francisco. So whether it's Ben Barch or Spencer Burford or somebody else they sign, giving Aaron Banks to an opponent in the NFC really isn't that big of a deal for me. I'm totally okay with that. Deebo Samuel obviously gets traded to the Commanders. That stings in itself, but it's a good thing for them. Got a 5th round pick back in exchange. But in free agency, Jalen Moore and Elijah Mitchell going to the Chiefs. Jalen Moore getting 2 years and $30 million from the Chiefs. What a great deal for him. I think a player that San Francisco tried to bring back. I think, in fact, I know they wanted to bring back, but the money was too big. I was actually on the radio in Kansas City trying to sell them on Jalen Moore. He was one of 2 players last year on the 49ers, and this did not include Dominic Pooney, who had a run blocking grade and a pass blocking grade above 70. So a rather consistent player, 27 years old, ascending player in the NFL. Good for Jalen Moore. I just wish it wasn't the Chiefs. I wish it was like the Chargers, or, they already had 2 tackles, but a team like the Colts or the Texans, not the Kansas City Chiefs, but good for him. Elijah Mitchell, 1 year, $3.5 million to Kansas City. Just kind of a whatever thing. Cool. You were never going to be a part of the running back room again. Too many injuries, but if he plays well for them, good stuff. I don't think he'll get any draft pick compensation back when it comes to comp picks in free agency, as San Francisco already has maxed out this year's comp cap, if you will. But still, good for Elijah Mitchell. He may play well for KC behind Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. One of the other big splashes we saw, in fact, that I think the second highest paid former San Francisco 49er in this year's free agency class was a 3-year, up to $60 million deal for Charvarius Ward, who signed with the Colts. Good for Mooney. There are so many things that went wrong for him last year that were heartbreaking on a personal level. And I think for Charvarius Ward, getting out of California, getting to a place where they're going to, I think, have Lou Anarumo as their DC. I know the quarterback position is somewhat unstable, but Samuel Womack's there. So he'll have some partners in crime, if you will, that are former San Francisco 49ers. But a place where I think he'll succeed. It's a dome. It's inside. And is almost one of the best places you can go from a city standpoint compared to the Bay Area. Again, you're playing indoors. Indianapolis is one of the best football cities in the entire country. So good for Mooney. Happy for him and his family. I don't think there is a single person that can say anything bad about Charvarius Ward. He's one of the few players that he was paid actually underpaid, if you will, by the Niners in free agency. And I think in his 3 years in San Francisco, kind of outplayed that contract he got. So happy for him. Happy he was a San Francisco 49er for the 3 years we had him. And I hope he plays great out there. DeForest Buckner's also there, so even more reasons to go out there and root for the Colts next season. Javon Hargrave going to be a Viking. That seems to be the case, which is interesting. They lose Sam Darnold. He goes to Seattle Seahawks. They get Javon Hargrave, albeit not a great trade-off for them. But Hargrave, I think, can still play. He's in his early 30s. When he's healthy, one of the better pass rushing defensive tackles, albeit getting older as the years goes by. But he's healthy. Happy for him. But then the smallest move, probably outside of the Elijah Mitchell signing with KC, was the Joshua Dobbs to the Patriots for 2 years, $8 million. He was kind of a wild card to come back, albeit I would love to have seen it. I just don't think the play style meshed well with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know what Shanahan didn't like about him. Maybe it was the reckless behavior at times with the football, too many turnovers. That said, 2 years, $8 million behind Drake May. He has Mike Vrabel, who I believe Joshua Dobbs was the quarterback for the team that almost beat the Jaguars for the division a couple years back. So there is some connections there. He likes the head coach, likes the play caller. So good for Joshua Dobbs, getting almost $10 million from the Patriots. Malik Collins got released. I was shocked by that, albeit the roster bonus due in March made that a highly likely or a high probability cutting this offseason. So I really wasn't surprised, but I certainly was shocked it happened because it left San Francisco pretty barren at defensive tackle. That said, I do want to get back to some YouTube comments because there's some pretty big ones here. Let's see what we have. The first one, the most important one, is Sterling Bennett staying? Yes. Yes, I am. I ain't going nowhere. I ain't leaving, if you want to quote Leo from Wolf of Wall Street. Let's see what we have here also in the YouTube chat. Leonard Floyd goes to the Atlanta Falcons for about 1 year, $10 million, which he was released this morning and signed like 2 hours later. So one of the other moves that I was actually pretty shocked about, we kind of got wind of the Joey Bosa maybe signing pretty soon with San Francisco, or at least that was the assumption being made by many of the people in the know. And then my thought was you have Bosa, Nick Bosa that is, and Joey Bosa, who has a long injury history. Leonard Floyd is kind of the great foil to both them, right? Him be the third guy. He'll be in a rotation. And I was really shocked that Leonard Floyd, if they signed Joey Bosa, was the one out the door. However, player in his early 30s, last year of his deal, getting a nice chunk of change. Parag is being ruthless, cold, and calculated. And Leonard Floyd is no longer a San Francisco 49er, getting a 1 year, $10 million deal by the Falcons. I do want to say that the 8.5 sacks he had, the 9 sacks he had almost last year, may have been one of the least impactful near 10 sack seasons I've seen as a Niner fan in a long time. Again, the cutting him if you sign Joey Bosa may not make much sense. And I think him staying if you sign Joey Bosa was a better move and is a better move in the long run. However, he just wasn't impactful. He had like 1 or 2 big games and that was it. There wasn't a consistent pressure being put on quarterbacks by Floyd. So if you can sign somebody else or draft somebody else and get Joey Bosa, I am much more on board with that. If it means you can save some money, that's always the big thing. Save money. That's what they want to do. That's what this is. And so I don't love that. I am at a wait and see with what they do at edge rusher, but you can certainly justify it when it is all said and done if they can go figure things out with free agency and the NFL draft. Back to the YouTube comments. Fish and Chips asks here, Sterling, have you bought any other shirts so we know who's leaving? Usually I refrain from buying Niners gear unless it's like a no-name or more of a team-centered thing. But funny enough, I got this picture right here for Christmas. It's signed by Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, and Deebo Samuel. And Deebo's already gone, so Maybe Brock's next. I hope that's incorrect, but you never know what can happen this offseason, knowing that contracts get tricky down the road. But I think CMC is pretty locked in place this year. But I don't have any more insight into who I think may be gone based on my apparel purchases in the recent present. Papa J says that I would love to have Hufanga back for one more year for pure nostalgia, excuse me. Yeah, no longer having a feisty feline, if you will, prowling the safety room or the back end of the defense will be weird, but I think they're set up to not a great coverage player. So I think it's a good move to let Hufanga go. And in all caps, Niners Red Zone says, nothing makes sense anymore. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it does pretty soon. I think we can get on board, but also he says senseless. If it don't make dollars, it don't make. Is there a second part there? I don't think so. Look, it's a very emotional off season. A lot's going on. It stinks to watch some of the better players leave. We are seeing teams sign a lot of big names, and I'm just not sure that it's going to pay off for certain teams. I am okay with San Francisco kind of waiting things out. This is a really bad free agents class. This is a really bad class. There are some big names, but there isn't an instant impact, superstar, right? I don't think that's the case. The Dolphins just signed Ashton Davis, mind you, so pretty funny there, but I don't really see any big name, really impactful players. You can argue Drew Dahlman would have made sense for San Francisco, but even then, the second highest paid center for a player that has some pass blocking issues. I didn't love that. Didn't think it was going to happen. So I'm okay with San Francisco waiting things out, playing things out. 2025 was not great. And I think they are trying to look towards the future in the draft. You have to have an influx of young talent to hopefully carry you into making the next core. So none of these moves surprise me. If you have been on the podcast, watching, listening, no matter where it is, none of these things really should surprise you at all. This is what we've been expecting for months and weeks. So I was not shocked to watch half this stuff. However, there was one move that, while we've talked about, I didn't expect to come. And that was San Francisco releasing Kyle Juszczyk. You saw the outpouring on social media from fans, teammates, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey. This one sucked. He was the very first free agent Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch ever signed in San Francisco when they got here. He was, at the point in time, the longest tenured 49er. And watching him leave was weird. It was a very weird situation because there had been hints for a long time. They asked him to take a pay cut last year, and he said, okay. He openly talked about that kind of affecting him emotionally and in his mind. He was very open about maybe this was his last year in San Francisco. The writing may have been on the wall for him, and he understood that. But you just don't really expect a team to cut a player you've kind of fallen in love with, not just as a fan base, but also a head coach, a GM that has meant so much. I already kind of talked about the impact that Dre Greenlaw had as a rookie, kind of getting San Francisco's defense, helping them get back to form, and really instilling this aggressive, hyper focused, energetic mindset on the defense. The swarm mentality is really what Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw brought to this team, and it kind of set the tone for the defense. Whereas Kyle Juszczyk with George Kittle at the time, Jimmy Garoppolo, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, Joe Staley, those players also, I think, had a very similar impact into the offense. And you can debate how much of an impact, that's fine, but
whether it's a movie night or just midday, Skinny Pop is a salty snack that keeps on giving. Made with just 3 simple ingredients for an irresistibly delicious taste and a large serving size that lasts. Deliciously popped, perfectly salted. Skinny Pop. Popular for a reason. Shop Skinny Pop now.
I think for a team that has gone through 3 different centers, Weston Richburg, Alex Mack, Jake Brendel, multiple quarterbacks, Brian Hoyer, Beathard, Mullins, Jimmy G, Trey Lance, Joshua Dobbs, Brandon Allen, Brock Purdy. Having that stable fullback alongside you was a big deal. He's played kind of that number 2 tight end role for them. Really gave Kyle Shanahan some comfort knowing he was back there in the backfield and being his number 2 tight end as a fullback. A very smart player, a Harvard graduate, as we all know. And it sucks. Like, I don't think we're talking about this great running game had it not been for Kyle Juszczyk. Now, obviously, he's a fullback, and you can debate the impact of a fullback usually has, but high-paid fullbacks usually don't make it on rosters anymore. I think the fullback has kind of run its course in this iteration of the NFL. So seeing him cut wasn't this massive surprise, but it did certainly kind of pull on the heartstrings. I just think that having him next to, all the quarterbacks we've had here, he's kind of like a number 2 center, if you will. He sees the game like a center as a quarterback. And I think a reason is why you saw Christian McCaffrey, who was already great in his own right, but you saw this offense be incredible in 2022 and 2023 was Brock, Juszczyk, and CMC. There's more factors obviously into that, but Juszczyk just sees the game differently, and I think has helped Brock Purdy grow as a player, and even Christian McCaffrey grow as a player. They essentially have 3 quarterbacks or players that see the game like quarterbacks in that backfield when it was Purdy, CMC, and Kyle Juszczyk, which it stinks. But the reason why I talk so much about him is because I'm seeing a lot of people, and Tommy Huxley kind of already talked about it here, and I see many more of you hinting at the center position, but I'll bring it back up. He says, with Brendel as our center, we are going nowhere. Okay. I was in a group chat with some fans, and that was a major comment throughout everybody's takeaways. And their quotes were, I can't believe Jake Moody and Jake Brendel are still here, and Dre Greenlaw, Deebo Samuel, Talanoa Hufanga, and Kyle Juszczyk are all gone. And I understand that from a player point of view, where Kyle Juszczyk, Deebo Samuel, Hufanga, and Greenlaw usually look like they have more in the tank than Jake Brendel does, who had a terrible year last year for San Francisco. And I understand, like, Jake Brendel was bad. There's everybody on Twitter, on social media, on X, in the YouTube chat saying we have to get a center. I have been long-standing saying that I think San Francisco likes Jake Brendel more than we think we do, or that we think they do, excuse me. And they signed Matt Hennessy to a 2-year deal last year. He has 1 year left. They can draft somebody, but again, this center class isn't great. I don't think San Francisco wanted to pay big money for a center this offseason, knowing that I don't think people realize this. Jake Brendel has 3 more years on his contract. They're going into year 2 of a 4-year contract extension. So cutting him didn't make logistical sense. You couldn't save much money on your books. And while again, we don't like Jake Brendel, knowing they like him a little bit more than we do, I think they value him at a higher clip and are open to retaining him for at least 1 more year. I think next year, that's a different story. You couldn't save much by cutting him now. I think next year, though, if he's bad again or doesn't play great, that's when you make that move. But this year, 3 years left on his contract, doesn't make much logistical sense to cut Jake Brendel. Whereas Hargrave, Floyd, Juszczyk, Deebo, Greenlaw, Hufanga were either impending free agents or had 2 years or less on their contracts. So there is some logical reason as to why Jake Brendel is still here. Although as fans, I know we're irate, we're frustrated. And I also think this Niners team believes in Jake Brendel and Jake Moody more than I think fans want to admit they are, which I'm sure is going to be a long story and going to be a very prevalent story during the year. I just think that we have to understand that they're cutting players that logically can, 1, save them money, or 2, have 1 or 2 years on their books, whereas Brendel and Moody are still somewhat, I say, valuable to them, whereas for us, maybe not so much. Although I think it's really important to keep focus here. I think it's really important to keep focus that when it comes to the blueprint, when it comes to what the 49ers are wanting to do, wanting to emulate and copy and paste over for their franchise, it is the Los Angeles Rams. This has been a talking point here on the show for a long time. Reboot, get more draft picks, have a large, fresh, young, quick, fast influx of young players, rebuild your defense, your offensive line, your offense on top of that. And to do that, sometimes you have to take some hurt along the way and pay the piper early. Then later, all the talk of San Francisco, pushing that can down the road's over with. This is them ripping the Band-Aid off and saying goodbye. So if you look at how the Rams did things in 2023, had a $79.3 million dead cap hit, whereas the San Francisco 49ers right now have a 77 plus and counting $1 million dead cap hit. So I think that they're trying to copy that. They saw what the Rams did, an older roster that's still kind of rebuilding itself in a way, but are competitive. They've gone to the playoffs twice the last 2 years. Almost had Philadelphia beat in the playoffs, albeit maybe there was some weather conditions that helped them. So I think San Francisco views themselves in a better position than the Rams were, but a lot of that hinges on what they can do in the NFL draft. If you hit on 6 or 7 players, then you're in business. You find yourself being a real contender again. But if you don't and you miss, then it's like, oh crap, this plan is ruined. However, you still kind of set yourself up for a better free agency in the next few years or so, knowing you have money to spend on maybe one of the few elite players, depending on who's available in next year's free agency class. Before I go on to the rumor mill, I do want to get to some more YouTube comments here very quickly. Fluffy Ninja asks, do you think the Niners will move back in the first round to pick up other assets? I think it's really possible they do. I'm not sure he'll be there at 11. That is like a slam dunk must take. There's a lot of talk today from Tim Kawakami, and we're hearing some rumblings that, Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, may be the guy. Replace Kyle Juszczyk with him. Replace, in a way, Deebo Samuel with him as well, knowing he has the receiver H-back capabilities. I think 11 is super rich. However, when you talk about best player available, that's an option. However, I'd move back, maybe gain a second-round pick in 2 years, I guess in next year's draft technically, or gain some more day 2 picks this year. If you want to have a really big, a lot of draft picks, young players coming in a very deep defensive tackle class, well, that day 2 is that spot you want to get a lot of your players. I think San Francisco sees that and says, yep, that's the plan. Maybe I'm wrong, but it certainly feels that way, knowing how they've gutted the defensive line. Robert Saleh's here for a reason. If it was Nick Sorensen, I don't think you see as much of this, but Robert Saleh's here. They believe in him. This is we are going to give you, albeit a much cheaper version of it, hopefully everything you like. Let you rebuild our defensive line. And if it works out, then they are cooking with Robert Saleh as their defensive coordinator. Leon Sandcastle says this, again, love that name. I think Brendel has a $3 million option bonus in April, which it is more cash that Jed can save. If that's the case, I'll believe you for the sake of conversation. Is that really enough? I don't think it's enough over the long term of the deal to make that worth it, knowing they like Brendel more than we do. But you never know. San Francisco is in that ruthless time frame when it comes to how they are kind of shifting as a franchise. But let's dive into quickly here some rumor mill conversation. But first, I do want to let you know to use our promo code 49ers Access, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Okay, the rumor mill today isn't a big one. There's not much happening. However, we have some Joey Bosa stuff, some Jameis Winston conversation, some Raheem Mostert reunion talk, and even some Brock Purdy contract negotiation updates. So let's start with Joey Bosa. It looks like Joey Bosa is coming to San Francisco. I know there are some Miami Dolphin talk out there from going to Miami. His father played there for about 3 years. They live in Florida. But to cut Leonard Floyd usually means there's another move coming. And I think if you're cutting Leonard Floyd, you are going to probably bring in Joey Bosa. I'm not one to discuss like Slick Rick, the dog on Twitter, but not even him. Like all the indications are pointing towards Joey Bosa joining his brother Nick in San Francisco, which again, cutting Floyd and signing Joey, I don't love that. I wish they could both be here knowing Joey's durability concerns. However, if you hit in the draft or you're signing somebody else you like, I'm open to seeing what they do. But I do want to get to Jameis Winston because the Joey Bosa stuff is played out. We talked about it plenty of times. We're more in a wait and see game with him, but I do think he will still sign in San Francisco when it's all said and done. But yesterday, seemingly out of nowhere, where I don't think, or I wouldn't have thought San Francisco would have been a player in the Jameis Winston negotiations or the Jameis Winston sweepstakes. According to Josina Anderson, the Niners are somewhat interested in bringing in Jameis Winston, which if Joshua Dobbs didn't fit your play style, I don't know if Jameis Winston does either. He's more of a fringe starter or a top-of-the-line backup, albeit has plenty of drawbacks, I think, will completely just make Shanahan an irate head coach if he has to play. Jameis is a funny dude. The content would be out of this world. He'd be eating W's on the side. Him and George Kittle would be absolute money on the sidelines, on the practice field. But the turnovers that he causes, the lack of decision-making or the poor decision-making that is, I think would just make Shanahan blow a gasket consistently. I think it's a terrible, terrible move if they did that. I'd rather have Joe Flacco. Mac Jones is still out there. I think Mac Jones makes more sense than Jameis, albeit, again, the fan base may hate that. I think Jameis just, he'll give you 30 touchdowns, but in the same season give you 30 interceptions. So he is a definitive boomer bust player where he'll beat a good team, and the next week he looks like the worst quarterback in football. And you're like, holy, like what happened to Jameis Winston? So that was shocking. And I don't really think he fits the system. I don't think he the arm talent's there. It's just in between the numbers and in between his eyes. I don't know if Jameis has it when it comes to the decision-making that Kyle wants. Now, there's an argument that Jameis could maybe benefit from Kyle Shanahan getting guys open, but even then, that also is a big factor where you don't really have the players at receiver, which they may get some in free agency or the draft, but currently, Jameis would probably need to have some excellent separating receivers where San Francisco doesn't have that right now. And so it was confusing to read that and see that. And just was wait, what? What the heck? Okay, I love Jameis as a person and player, but just as a quarterback, as Fish and Chip says here, Winston throws interceptions in his sleep. Yeah, yeah. Spy vs. Spy says, though, I love Jameis. So maybe there is some way to fit Jameis in here, but I feel like he'd be kind of a higher paid backup compared to a Joe Flacco or compared to a Mac Jones. I mean, Zach Wilson got paid a pretty penny, but it is was interesting. Why? How does this make sense? But a more confusing move potentially is the rumblings. And according to Raheem Mostert himself, he admitted that San Francisco and his agent and himself have had, quote unquote, been having discussions on a potential reunion, which baffling, confusing. I like Raheem Mostert. I am very appreciative of his time in San Francisco, but you drafted Isaac Guerrero, who is literally, although a bigger player, the Raheem Mostert archetype, and you signed Jordan Mason on a second-round tender, or you're trying to at least, to keep him around for a year or trade him. And whether they keep Mostert or keep Mason or not, bringing Mostert in doesn't make much sense. However, we've heard that there's been some Keenan Allen rumors, some Robert Woods rumors. Those are older players. I think maybe San Francisco is trying to band-aid themselves for like 1-year contracts to maybe keep themselves somewhat competitive if in the case this draft is not great. But that's more speculative than, actual fact. So Raheem he certainly fits the offense. He played here and the Dolphins the last couple of years. Very successful back for how his story was going initially. That said, like, even if you don't bring back Mason, he has signed Patrick Taylor Jr. to a 1-year deal, so he's currently your 4th running back. You have Garendo, you have Christian McCaffrey. I don't really understand signing Raheem Mostert unless you're trading away Jordan Mason, which could happen. But even then, there's durability concerns with Mostert, which already exists with Christian McCaffrey and Garendo. So you would think you'd want that kind of bowling ball style of durable running back behind those guys, which Mason isn't the most durable guy, but he can certainly be the power back with Christian McCaffrey. And you're also entering in one of the drafts that have probably the deepest running back class in years. So it doesn't make much sense. He wouldn't get big money. He'd get like $6 million, but you're already paying Mason, if he signs that tender, like $5.5 million per year, which is at this point in time, if he signs that, the highest running back total in football. So I don't love that, but that hinges on what they do with Jordan Mason. And even then, he's like 32 years old, 33 years old. I don't think I'd love that move for San Francisco. Just go draft 2 running backs if you want to. I'd rather do that than go sign Raheem Mostert for 1 year for like $7 million. I would not want to do that this offseason, which brings us to the final rumor out there for the 49ers, and that is Brock Purdy. A lot of talk around Brock Purdy. We've talked about him plenty of times, the contract stuff. The latest report, which I think is a very obvious one from Schefter and Rappaport, is that there is no contract extension imminent right now with Brock Purdy. Yeah, no duh. This is as obvious for anybody paying attention. Schefter and Silver made this clear as day a couple weeks ago or last week or so. Yeah, like the way everything was trending was, okay, a deal could get done soon. And then like in a 4-day span, it was everything's on pause. This ain't going to happen. They want to gut the roster first, cut some money away, and then go into the draft and figure things out later. So don't really like, this is obviously like this didn't need to have brand new articles and a new audio clip. This was like, if you've been watching, listening, this was clear as day right now. Well, certainly offers are getting put back and forth. There is no current contract extension imminent for Brock Purdy, which I think is pretty obvious. That said, I want to let you guys know, if you want to perform like the GOAT himself, Jerry Rice, if you want to be like Parag Marathe and Jed York, being the GOATs of gutting this roster as we currently speak, then you're going to want to click that link down below and get yourself a can of GOAT Fuel. Whether you are a podcaster like myself, whether you're working that hard 9 to 5, a blue collar, a white collar worker, does not matter. GOAT Fuel is the energy drink of choice for you. If you love coffee, it's a healthy coffee alternative. And if you click my link down below, you can save 10% off your purchase for GOAT Fuel. So grab yourself a can and support the show on top of that. But that brings us to the additions that San Francisco has made this offseason, which are not very big names, as to be expected. And I think while maybe a lot of fans are shaking their head or not really understanding, or at least, I don't want to say perplexed, but let down, probably the word I'll use here, because they didn't make many. They have signed a few players, the small ones being Kevin Givens is back, some defensive tackle insurance, probably your 4th or 5th guy you don't mind having back in your D-tackle room. They brought back Patrick Taylor Jr., their 4th running back on the roster currently, who I think we like enough but don't love. Certainly an option to probably get cut if they draft a running back or two this offseason. They brought back Curtis Robinson for 1 year, a player that I talked about in the last podcast, where I would not be shocked to see him being, if he's healthy, one of the Dre Greenlaw quote-unquote replacements. I'm assuming it's Winters, Bethune, Curtis Robinson, Fred Warner, and probably a draft pick they bring in to kind of help round out that linebacker room next year. They also have 4 compensatory picks coming their way in the near future. They're going to get one for Travarius Ward, Aaron Banks, Talanoa Hufanga, and Jalen Moore, barring who they sign this offseason. Again, I think they're going to want to keep those compensation picks, but again, they've lost so many players where I think if they go sign somebody for a Hufanga-style deal, they'll probably get one back for somebody else they cut a release, or someone else signs elsewhere as well. So right now, they have brought back Kevin Givens, Taylor Jr., Curtis Robinson, and they're getting a 4th-round pick for Travarius Ward, a 4th-round pick for Aaron Banks, a 4th or 5th-round pick for Hufanga, depending on how many get handed out next draft cycle, and a 5th-round pick for Jalen Moore, on top of the 5th-round pick they already got for Deebo Samuel during his trade to the Commanders. So a lot of smaller moves being had for San Francisco, a lot of avenues to get some young players in the roster. That said, it also got announced 4 minutes ago by Matt Barrows and the San Francisco 49ers themselves. They have 4 compensatory picks this draft class. So the Ward, Banks, Hufanga, and more signings, those are compensation picks for next year's draft. For this year's draft, however, they have pick 100 coming in round number 3. They have pick 138 coming in round number 4. They have 2 7th-round picks, that being via pick 249 and pick 252. So some news for you there coming out of the recent news by San Francisco. But I do want to get to who San Francisco has actually signed this offseason, because
this episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I don't think it tells you too much, but I do think there are some improvements being made on the roster, albeit some pretty small ones. The first big signing they made, the big one being yesterday, that was tight end Luke Farrell, former Jacksonville Jaguars tight end, who signed a 3-year, up to $20.25 million contract with San Francisco. Important to note, up to does not mean the base money he'll get. That's obviously with incentives. So we have no idea actually what that contract looks like. It could be 3 for 15, 3 for 18, but it's up to a $20.25 million over the next 3 years with the 49ers. And Farrell's not going to give you much as a receiver. There is some yak ability, albeit not much, but it's there, but certainly limited in what he can do. However, he is known for his blocking. Luke Farrell is one of the best blocking tight ends in football. He has a career 73.7 pass blocking grade, although his run blocking isn't great, a 58.2. However, Eric Saubert last year had a 31 pass blocking grade. So Luke Farrell, an instant improvement over Eric Saubert as a tight end to a blocking tight end to with the San Francisco 49ers. And the fact is, they paid some relatively big money for Luke Farrell. Let Kyle Juszczyk go, bring in Luke Farrell. They're finally filling that tight end to position. They tried to with Cam Latu, that failed. Braden Willis, he's still here, but that also has failed to a certain extent. And then they tried to sign Brock Wright last offseason. That fell through as an RFA, went back to the Lions. So they've been trying to do this. And I think had they signed Brock Wright, you can make an argument they probably would have cut Kyle Juszczyk last offseason. So it makes sense for this to be the offseason. As soon as they sign the Luke Farrell, they go and cut Kyle Juszczyk. But that means they're probably going to run more 12 personnel compared to 22 personnel this offseason, which means essentially one extra player, meaning George Kittle on the offensive line and two in the backfield. Now it's more of, you're going to be more consistent with that. So I think that this is something where you want to see the adjustments. You're seeing the adjustments, and it remains to be seen if Farrell pans out. He obviously could stink for the 49ers, but I think, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, this is the case. Having Luke Farrell on this team will hopefully alleviate pressure from George Kittle being the inline tight end on a consistent basis, get him out of the kind of sixth offensive tackle or offensive lineman position in bigger games, let him be used as a receiver more consistently. And hopefully when you lose Deebo Samuel, you want to see George Kittle kind of carry over after having a tremendous 8-touchdown, 100 or a 1,000-yard season. Do it again, be a more impactful piece as a receiver. So I'm hoping Luke Farrell can be that for this team, but I don't think he's the end all be all when it comes to tight end 2. This is a really good tight end class. And I think, and I put this out back in February, so mark it on your calendars. I said this back in February that while Farrell can replace Juszczyk, that's fine. I think San Francisco should, and I think they will, be interested in Benjamin Juszczyk from Georgia in this year's draft. He's 6'4", 245 pounds, a kind of can do it all kind of player, an above average blocker as a pass blocker and a run blocker. They can play inside, play outside, play fullback, play inline tight end. I think as your third or fourth tight end for a year, depending on how much they like Braden Willis or Mason Pline or Jake Tunges, I think Benjamin Juszczyk and Luke Farrell can be really good blocking tight ends for this team. And if you're lucky, one of those guys can, probably Juszczyk in this case, be more of a receiving tight end as he goes into his second, third, and fourth year as a pro. So this is not the end-all, be-all of making a tremendous tight end room. Kittle's phenomenal. Probably a Hall of Famer of the future. One of the greatest, if not already the greatest tight end in Niner history. But I think Farrell's a great number 2 behind him as a blocker. But I want to see them add some more oomph behind him because this is a deep tight end class. And I think if you want to replace Juszczyk or just add depth in general, Benjamin Juszczyk from Georgia, watch out for that name in this year's draft class. But overall, I like the Farrell signing. Hard to complain about getting a really good blocking tight end too. These are valuable players. You have to have them. And if he's used correctly, it benefits George Kittle, getting him opened as a receiver, kind of removes the, I don't want to say doubt, but hopefully gives him more involved in bigger games because he's one of the best offensive weapons in the NFL when he's used as a receiver. It also helps you on the offensive line in the red zone, being a pass blocker. We saw so many times last year, San Francisco's offense could not score some touchdowns. A lot of that had to do with the guards and tight ends. Farrell can hopefully help you be a good blocker in the red zone. I don't think fans truly understood how terrible Eric Saubert was as a backup tight end. Again, a 30 pass blocking grade. Farrell walks in with a 73.7, a instant 40-point upgrade as a pass blocker. So I like the signing. Not a big one, but I think a good depth backup signing for them at a much needed position, that being backup tight end. The other small signing was Richie Grant, safety, previously of the Atlanta Falcons. And people were somehow up in arms about this of like, really? Richie Grant? That's it? I myself would have maybe preferred an Ashton Davis or players like, say, MJ Stewart, Julian Blackmon, albeit Blackmon's probably going to get bigger money elsewhere as a really good coverage player. But Richie Grant is fine. I think the expectation of fans, because Jair Brown played so poorly last year, is that, well, he stinks, that they don't like him anymore. Just because you don't like them or believe in them doesn't mean the team doesn't either, right? So I think it's okay to let players develop and grow. Jair Brown, I think, is one of those players they like a lot. it also doesn't remove the idea they can draft the safety in this year's draft as well. So I don't understand the hit Grant's signing got. He was terrible last year in 2024. So I do get it from that side of things. However, he played 11 games last year, wasn't a starter, lost his starting job to Jesse Bates. But in 2022 and 2023, I think those years give us more intel into who Grant is as a player overall. He was a really solid run defender in 2023, and in 2022 had his best coverage play. So, albeit some inconsistencies, if he is your third or fourth safety, you don't mind it at all. It's okay. Like, this is an okay move to make for this team. Those years from 2022 to 2025 or 24, excuse me, combined for 161 tackles, 3 interceptions, and a 111.3 passer rating when targeted. So again, there's coverage concerns, but I think he does, and this is the big key here, he improves special teams. We talked, it felt like for years, special teams took years off of my life last year, all of our lives last year. And it just like mind-numbing how terrible they were, like 63.8 like negative points per DVOA or whatever the number was last year. But Grant has played over 1,000 special teams snaps in his career, has a 66.7 special teams grade, which if you are a PFF person, that's actually above average. So you're getting a good special teams player. I think this kind of has Brant Boyer's hands over it, but also Robert Saleh will certainly like a player like Richie Grant. He can play the slot. He can play in the box. Again, there are concerns, but if you're losing Hufanga, and maybe there's a way you cut George Odom too, I think that could be on the table. I think Grant, if they cut Odom, is simply his replacement, which Odom was also really bad last year too. So I like the move. It's a younger player, only for up to $1.5 million. So not expensive for 1 year. You're not losing much, not gaining much as a safety, but I think you are gaining a much needed upgrade on special teams with some versatility in the box at slot corner. There is ways to kind of talk yourself into this, where I think not a great signing, but a kind of good rounding out the roster signing for San Francisco. The newest San Francisco 49er is Luke Gifford, though. Funny enough, I had this show scheduled for earlier in the day, but Luke Gifford signed, and I said, oh, Luke Gifford signs, we got to pause the show for about an hour or so because I got to know more about who Luke Gifford is, because really underrated player where I didn't think San Francisco would want to sign a special team linebacker, albeit they did cut Demetrius Flanagan-Falls. So there was a need for depth there. Curtis Robinson's already back, already talked about him, but you bring in Luke Gifford, I think does give you, again, raises the floor of the team. That's the important part here. And again, Brant Boyer, as this team's new special teams coordinator, gets somebody he can trust on a very consistent basis. Gifford played just 5 games last year at linebacker, had 24 tackles. So again, not much from a starting caliber perspective. However, he had a 66.7 coverage grade and a 73.5 tackling grade. So he's a good tackler, underrated in coverage. Probably your 5th linebacker on the roster. Not going to be a guy you rely on much, but I think does have potential if needed to step up and be a depth piece for you if somebody happens to go down, knowing you don't have Dre Greenlaw now and knowing there has been some injury history with D. Winters. Again, a floor-raising signing for San Francisco's defense. But on special teams, this is where this signing makes all the sense in the world. Luke Gifford had 14 special teams tackles last year. That ranked 5th in the NFL. And going back to PFF, his 83.8 special teams grade ranked 19th among players that played 50% of their team snaps. So a really stout tackler, a really good special teams player. And when you talk about replacing Demetrius Flanagan-Falls or Tatum Bethune on special teams, Gifford is a A-plus signing from a special teams standpoint. Since 2019, he has 49 special teams stops, which ranks 9th in football. So again, this is not a, oh my God, it's an A++. This is a nice special teams floor-raising move where I think you cannot dislike this move. It's small. It's a small move. You're not going to hear, Luke Gifford's name, but I go back to those teams with Jim Harbaugh. When I grew up watching this team play, think of players like Dan Skuta, who underrated signing. Who the heck is Dan Skuta? But became a relatively known player because of how good he was on special teams. I think Luke Gifford can have a Dan Skuta-like approach or impact on this team where maybe he's not a starter, but a fine depth piece, but a really good special teams player for you that can hopefully help you be a difference in games, because we saw last year, special teams was atrocious. Any way you can improve that room, that team, that group of players is an A+ for me. So I like the move. And I think he's going to have a larger impact than, say, Richie Grant would on the team overall. But, it's day 2 of free agency. They're not going to be big players. So Gifford makes some sense, a floor-raising move for San Francisco, which brings me to the last topic I have in my notes for today, that being Jordan Mason. Because Jordan Mason is, I think, one of the remaining players to watch in regards to who can get moved. Obviously, we have Brandon Ayuk still. I don't think he gets traded, but I think Jordan Mason is a shoo-in to get traded this offseason. San Francisco just placed a second-round tender on Jordan Mason. That means one of two things. One, he gets paid $5.3 million this year as a base salary if he signs that tender. That would be the highest paid backup running back in the entire league. Okay. If he happens to sign elsewhere, San Francisco gets a second-round pick back in return. A big win for San Francisco either way. However, the reason why I think he's going to get traded, in what world do you want to bring back Jordan Mason on a $5.3 million salary in what is assumed to be, what I think will be, one of the deepest running back classes in recent history? When you can find that 4th-round pick running back, that 5th-round pick running back, and go, yep, you're the RB2, you're the RB3. You have Grendo last year. You like him a ton. He showed flashes. Yes, I think you should sign a back in free agency, a durable one that is. But I think you can find guys like Kyle Monangai, Khalil Mullings. You can certainly find people that I think can help you out as running backs. Whereas Jordan Mason making $5.3 million this year, I don't think that is aligning with the idea of cutting costs, albeit a young player, but an expensive young player really doesn't seem to fit in with the plan of an organizational shift that they are kind of imposing on the roster. So I like Jordan Mason. And to be fair here, they can work out an extension with him still. So his contract can change. He can sign for a 2-year deal, give him some more guarantees, make him a more comfortable player. However, I would not be shocked to watch him get traded. I think of the players on the roster still, which there aren't many, I think Jordan Mason is probably the highest probability to get traded amongst those still on San Francisco's roster. But what do you think about Jordan Mason's future? Do you think he gets traded? Does he stay? Get traded? Tell me what you think down below in the comments. Do you like the signing of Luke Gifford, Richie Grant, Luke Farrell? Do you like those deals? Tell me, would you want to bring in Joey Bosa, Jameis Winston, Raheem Mostert? Would you like those deals as well? And when it comes to the departures of Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Aaron Banks, Jalen Moore, Elijah Mitchell, Travarius Ward, Jalen Hargrave, Joshua Dobbs, Kyle Juszczyk, Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd, There are a lot of them. Tell me down below which one of those hurt you the most and which one are you frustrated about the most in the comments down below. To end today's show, though, I do want to dive back into the YouTube chat for one more second and get your final takeaways from the show itself. Fish and Chips says here, Richie Grant is a special teams only player. Kalachipto says the offensive line is pretty much set. And Lori Matthews, I think this is the comment Kalachipto is responding to here. And she asks here, who is playing offensive line and defensive line? You think they just draft those positions? Obviously, it depends on who's on the board. You can certainly talk yourself into drafting Armin Membu from Missouri as a right tackle for a year. I think he is probably one of the only players at the tackle position. You are kind of like, yep, you are a bona fide tackle. There are so many quote unquote right tackles and left tackles that have injury history or have shorter arm lengths, which are a concern. Hence why Jalen Moore got paid big money, because his arm length, it kind of is the tackle archetype, where Kansas City said, look, we're not getting the tackle in the draft. Go get more for a $15 million per year contract and help ourselves out there. That said, I think defensive line is going to be a heavy target for them, whether it is James Pierce or Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant or others early in the draft. I do think there is possibility where San Francisco trades back, gains more draft picks. However, I kind of think the offensive line is pretty much set. That said, I do think they'll draft some players. I think Marcus Mbao from Purdue, I've talked about him plenty of times. He can play center, left guard, right guard, tackle. He moves like a Shanahan offensive lineman. I'd love to get him here in San Francisco. The unfortunate part is so many teams run the same scheme now where it's like, damn, he's gone off the board pretty early. I could see them reaching for him, knowing they want to bring somebody else in. They have to find the backup right guard. And I think knowing Colton McKivitz is on his last year of his contract, I would not be shocked to watch them draft Mbao from Purdue, have him sit for a year, have him be the kind of, backup right guard, right tackle for a year behind Pooney and Ben Barch and Burford and McKivitz. Then next year, if he's ready, become the next starting right tackle. But I think overall, the offensive line's pretty much set in stone. They'll sign some depth guys here or there. Austin Pleasance, Charlie Heck could be back as really deep depth signings. But I think defense is the way they go. All the indications are basically defense. You brought in Saleh for a reason. They gutted the defensive line for a reason. They lost Hufanga. They lost Greenlaw. The offense is relatively intact. Pretty much the same offensive line. You have a returning, when healthy, Brandon Ayuk, which let's see if he gets traded or not. But you have Juwan Jennings, you have Pearsall, you have Cowan, you have Brock Purdy. You're probably going to redo George Kittle's contract. You have Christian McCaffrey, you have Grendo. A lot of this team needs, albeit there are some on offense, are mainly on defense. So I think in free agency, it'll be kind of a more, let's kind of raise that depth group to a higher level. I think the draft will be, let's hit some home runs on defense and make our unit a very, very scary team to face come playoff time, or at least make them so good where they're flying around making plays for Saleh and company. Joseph Ehrenberg says here, signing Joey Bosa will be a mistake in my opinion, only if it's like $8 million. I think that's a very accurate statement to make. My main concern with them cutting Leonard Floyd is that they may pay like $12 million for Joey Bosa, which, God, I hope not. But for a team like San Francisco, who has state income tax, unlike Florida, they may have to pay a higher wage to get him back to make maybe the same money he would get in Florida without the taxes. So I agree with you. I think it would be a mistake to pay Bosa big money for 1 year. However, they cut Floyd for a reason. You have to believe they have a plan in place. I think Joey Bosa is part of that plan, but that remains to be seen. I hope they get Joey. I wouldn't mind that at all. I've been talking about it for a long time, but we'll see. Again, it's only day 2 of free agency. So much can happen, but a lot has already happened for this team. A lot of signings that a lot of people wanted. Greenlaw gone, James Daniel gone, Drew Dahlman gone, Darius Slayton got signed, Ashton Davis got signed. Some of my predictions are still in play. We'll see if that comes to fruition. If you haven't seen or heard that podcast yet, go back to a couple days ago and you can get that for yourself. Sports fan, great name, straight to the point. Love that. Says here, Niners are killing it. Super Bowl, baby. I wouldn't go that far, but again, like everything, the plan has always been hit on the draft. Hit on the draft. If you do that, a lot can change really quickly for this team. That said, to sports fan, the great 1765, Fish and Chips, Niners throwback, Bobo, Joseph Ernberg, Lori Matthews, Tommy Huxley, Kawa Chipto, many more, Papa J, so many more in the YouTube comments, Benali P, I'm going to go all the way up. Strawberry Reacts, Spy vs. Spy, Keys. I'm going to keep going. Fluffy Ninja, all the way to the top. As high as I can go. 49ers Red Zone. Jesus M, who says 2026 free agency is also bad. Well, it depends on who gets cut and who gets brought back by their teams this offseason. And next offseason, great players always get cut when you least expect it. Again, going to the very top, I think I got everybody there. Clutch with the big laughing emoji. Beto from YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Hope you can like, share, subscribe, leave that review. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett. And until next time, hopefully it's tomorrow, but until next time, maybe it's live from Japan. Stay faithful.